let's talk about, you're working on a baby infant.
Infant formula. So we've got manufacturers like Abbott, Abbott Laboratories, and Mead Johnson manufacturing preterm infant formula. So this is formula for babies 37 weeks or below. And what we're finding is that it's causing necrotizing enterocolitis in those preterm infants.
Okay, what is necrotizing
enterocolitis? So it is probably one of the most tragic diseases that you can see in an infant or child. Necrotizing enterocolitis is essentially when bacteria enters the intestines and the gut of the child and causes the intestines to break down. So that little baby's gut, small intestinal tract, starts to eat itself from the inside out, and the baby's system just totally shuts down.
Okay, so I mean, all right, let's back up a little bit. Like, obviously, these are premature babies. They're not going to have the ability to latch on or breastfeed, so they need to be fed some type of formula. Have they always been fed this formula? I mean, what has been the standard of care, and did something change, or just an awareness that the outcomes were in part a function of the formula?
Right. So let me take you through the history of this. Infant formula has been around for a very long time. Of course, there's been advances in infant formula. The gold standard of infant feeding is always going to be breast milk. We know this. The manufacturers of infant formula know this. But what we've seen is as these corporations get bigger and bigger and the market for formula gets bigger and bigger, we see a shift, right? Less women are breastfeeding and more women are using formula. The reason for that is, of course, motivated by profits, right? But I believe it's being sourced from the formula companies to decrease the risk of breast milk, ultimately to increase their profit margin, right? So as time has gone by, formula has always been available to children since the 1960s. But now we're seeing more advancements. Now we're seeing people starting to target NICUs. That's where these infants are being fed, in the intensive care unit, right?
Intensive care unit of neonatal, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I can say neonatal. Okay.
But what were they fed before then?
I mean, it's primarily a breast milk heavy diet. And so here's the problem.
So the women would pump. Is that
right?
It?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the problem with formula, and we're not saying formula in general for infants is bad. We're saying formula for preterm infants is bad. Specifically the cow's milk formula, right? Because preterm infants' guts cannot properly digest that cow's milk formula. And the unique aspect of this case is that science has been around for a long time. These formula manufacturers have known about the science, the increased risk associated with necrotizing enterocolitis and cow's milk formula for a long time. But they still continue to manufacture it. Why? Because the breast milk feeding rates have gone down and the formula feeding rates have gone up. And what we have found is that these companies create brand loyalty in the NICUs with mothers. They finally find a solution for feeding these little itty babies. The babies grow on that, they develop, and they become loyal to that brand of formula, Abbott's brand, Mead's brand. And so it creates a brand loyalty for the next 3 years of that infant's life. And you just see, I compare it to big tobacco, to the opioid litigation. You have detailers, salespeople going into hospitals, getting hospitals, babies, mothers hooked on that type of formula so that ultimately they can create a customer for years to come.
Right. I mean, that's the dynamic. That's the dynamic with all products, it feels like, and even frankly, with political parties. I mean, if you start
right.
young on one, more often than not, you're going to carry through that. The problem is for these, did they have any reason to know, what do you need to prove in this instance? Like you have damages. Like, I mean, it's clear that from the science, I guess, I mean, you tell me, that these formulas are having bad outcomes with the children.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you need to prove for liability in this instance?
So when we walk into a case like this, the questions we ask ourselves and the questions that we ultimately have to show answer to a jury are, what did this company know? What should they have known? And what did they do about it once they figured out that there's a problem associated with their product? In addition to those three questions, we have to also answer, well, is there what we call a safer alternative design out there? Is there something else that these babies could have been ingesting, feeding on, that would have been safer for them? And the truth is that there is. Since 2006, we've had a product called Prolacta. Prolacta is a type of infant formula that is derived from human milk base. So rather than the cow's milk, you have actual breast milk that is being formulated in that product and sold to the NICU. So that's our safer alternative design. That's when the defendants say, well, we had no choice. These babies have to be fed. We say, no, well, they could have been fed a safer product, and you just chose not to invest in that, to manufacture that, right? Because what we think we'll see is that in the end, a cow's milk-based formula is going to be cheaper for these companies to manufacture. Tail is out of time.
It's almost
right.
Obvious that it would be.
And we see that. And I think that will really come out as this litigation goes forward, is it is a cost-benefit analysis every single time. Different case, same cost-benefit analysis. And that's what we see here.
Do they have to know that there was damage being done, or in how early in that process?
So these companies have to be put on notice of the issue, right? They have to be aware that their product is related to an increased risk of, in this case, necrotizing enterocolitis. And typically the way companies become aware of things like that is through clinical trials and independent studies and what we call cohort meta-analysis. And so as far back as the 1990s, you have studies coming out that say cow's milk is associated with an increased risk of necrotizing enterocolitis in preterm infants. Every single time a study is published like that should be a huge glaring red flag to the manufacturer. But instead, what we see them do and what they publicly do is they take that study, they rip it apart, they say, you can't trust this study for these reasons, and they ignore it. And they do that study after study after study. And then what you see them do is do their own internal clinical studies with the same flaws and use that as grounds to support that their product is safe.
And because what they're doing in terms of their strategy is they are playing this out as long as they can, because every day means X amount of profits. And so even if they know that at one point the music's going to end and we're going to have to, in this game musical chairs, we're going to sit and we'll be left out, that cost associated is going to be a fraction of what they've been able to make by essentially punting every time a study comes out. There's problems with this study. This is why we punt. I mean, in their mind, they're thinking like the outcome's either going to be we're able to ignore these studies in perpetuity, or we're not able to ignore these studies in perpetuity, but long enough that there's no payouts that are going to in any way make it not worth it for us to keep paying. I mean, that is the 85% of every interview I've had here is basically that's what we're hearing.
And what they really do, frankly, the defendants do a good job of here is if you create just enough doubt in the scientific community, you can do just that. You can punt. And so if you create that doubt with industry-funded science to challenge the independent science just a little bit, it allows them to keep manufacturing for a year, to continue on just enough until the crap really hits the fan, honestly, for lack of a better word.